Hi and welcome back to our channel. It's Lois here from Lois and Morgana Davidson Art, and today I'm going to be sharing with you how I painted this beautiful summer landscape. But first, a quick peep at my new book, Landscapes in Watercolour, Tips and Techniques for the Complete Beginner, which is now available to order or pre-order depending on where in the world you are and which shop you choose. So let's get on with the demo. This is the wonderful photograph that I found on Pixabay. I've substantially cropped the left half to, I think, make a slightly tighter, simpler composition, making this a really nice beginner-friendly painting. As always, the first thing I do is to simplify the scene onto the watercolour paper, just putting in the main features, so just a few simple lines for the horizon, the mountain, the headland, and of course the position of the little cottages on the top of the hill. I'm working lightly in pencil on my watercolour paper, which today is Milford 100% cotton cold press paper. It's taped to my board, and my board's at an angle of about 20 to 30 degrees, so gravity will help with the painting. Once I'm happy that all my elements are arranged nicely on the page, and of course I can use an eraser to erase anything that isn't quite right, then I can start painting. And I'm going to use the wet in wet method to start with, which means using clean water and a very large wash brush. This is a size 20 synthetic mop brush, and I'm wetting the sky area. Mostly all over, but I'm going to leave some dry patches where my clouds will be. I think you can see, hopefully, the slightly darker area where the water's being applied and the lighter areas in the sky which are dry. This means that I should get some softly diffused clouds if I just paint around those dry areas, which will resist the water and the paint running. I've swapped to my 1.5 inch Watercolor brush because it's the brush that I'm happiest using at the moment, but any large brush that you're comfortable with is perfect to paint skies. Sort of the shape you use and the shape that you choose is down to sort of personal taste, but any large wash brush. You can see that I'm dipping into my cobalt blue, which has a little touch of turquoise in it today, just to give it that lovely summer fresh feel. I'm painting around the dry areas, and I hope you can see how beautifully these colours are diffusing around the cloud edges. If I get any edges that are a little bit too hard, I can just soften them back with the brush. I'm going to bring the paint down as far as the horizon, carefully cutting around my cottages because I want to keep the cottages the white of the paper. That way they should stand out really nicely against the sky and make for a really nice point of interest. As the paint runs out in my wash brush, you can see there's less and less paint on the brush, so it's getting paler and paler. And this in itself is helping me to get some lovely variation in the sky. So it's sort of brighter blue near the top and lighter towards the bottom. I've now dipped into a strong mixture of my cobalt blue and turquoise, and using horizontal brush strokes, I shall paint in my water. I can add in a bit of Payne's grey to darken up across the horizon. And then continue working a little bit of this darker colour in with this paler, brighter blue. Still using these horizontal brush strokes. And hopefully I'll get the sort of illusion of cloud shadows in the water and light reflecting on the water too. I'll continue working on the water, maybe lifting out a little bit with a clean damp brush here and there, so I get a nice variety of lights and darks on the water, but keeping this horizontal orientation, and also lifting out a nice light waterline between the mountains and the edge of the water using a clean damp flat brush. Apologies, I forgot to switch the camera on, but I'll show you what I was doing. I was just using the tips of my 3/4 inch flat brush here and Payne's Grey and a bit of burnt umber, just running the darker tone into the edges of the water to create my beach and to begin to create the textures of my cliff. Doing a little bit more of that now so you can see exactly what I was doing, working around the shape of my headland. Just building up texture and tone to build up the illusion of the headland and the base of the cliff where it meets the water. And now some raw sienna in the foreground to begin to create an illusion of some sort of bracken and grasses and things, using raw sienna and across this sort of left-hand bottom corner. And some sap green, and I can bring some raw sienna and then the sap green across the cliff top, trying to follow the lay of the land so that I get this sort of gentle slope of the cliff coming up from the water. My brushstrokes are all fairly rough. They will sort of smooth out a little as they dry, but I'm hoping that I'm creating a little bit of texture here, but without having to sort of work too hard to achieve it. Less is more in these kinds of very simple paintings. I'm now dropping in a lighter value dark, just to link the beach and the cliffs. Again, to sort of add that directionality to the cliffs. And now this is my palette knife, and I'm going to scrape a little line back to the white of the paper through the foreground damp paint, and that will give me the illusion of highlights on my fence in the foreground. I can darken that up later. And now I need to leave everything to dry completely. Now that it's dry, I'm going to work onto the painting using mostly the wet on dry technique, which is using wet paint straight onto the dry painting. This gives me harder, crisper edges. And this is my cobalt blue. I've mixed a little bit of alizarin crimson into it, and a little bit of burnt sienna, plenty of water, so it's a sort of a bluish grey. And I shall try and create some depth and distance by using these very pale colours, which of course will dry back lighter than they're going on now, to create the depth and distance and recession as my mountains disappear off into the distance. And now back to my flat brush and using my dark mixture to continue to build up the darks where the beach meets the cliff. I'm adding a bit of shadow down the left side of each of my fence posts, and then I'll use a rigger brush to put in some fencing wires. This little bit of dark detail across the foreground helps to lead the eye into the painting. Then I can add a bit of darker sap green with a bit of burnt sienna added to it to put a little bit of shadow and suggested tone into the foreground grass. And now to work on the building. It doesn't need much, so I'm just taking a small brush and some burnt sienna, and I'm painting the rooftops with this lovely burnt sienna colour. You can see how much that stands out. I shall keep the walls white, but I'll knock those back in places with a little bit of very pale watery blue on the walls, so that just the gable end stands out brighter. This just helps to bed the buildings into the landscape a little. And I think I'm going to call that finished. I'm hoping that the simplicity of this scene works to convey the beautiful, wide open and expansive summer landscape here. Removing the tape, I can see the painting with fresh eyes. Seeing it with a clean white border helps me to imagine how it would look if it was mounted or matted and framed. And I'm quite happy with this, and I hope that you've found it useful. I hope you'll try something similar. So working with a pencil sketch is the best place to start, I find, and then that provides you with a roadmap for your watercolour washes. And I like to start with a wet in wet sky and then slowly build up the layers of the landscape. It can take a little bit of practice because watercolour isn't the easiest medium to work with, but it's such a worthwhile medium to get to grips with. So I hope that you'll enjoy playing around with these sorts of scenes. Well, thank you so much for watching. Please leave us a like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And thank you so much to everyone that supports us on Patreon. We really do appreciate you. I'll see you again soon. Take care and happy painting. Bye.